I banned my husband and father-in-law from being in the delivery room with me, because they won't stop talking about how I'm going to pass away during birth. My husband and I are expecting our first child, which I knew would be a really sensitive issue as his own mother passed away during childbirth with him. We met with a marriage counselor to talk things through at the beginning, and he swears he's been seeing his own therapist twice a month throughout my pregnancy. I don't want to call him a liar, but I'm fairly sure he's either not making the visits or not talking about the big issue. He and his father, who is a hugely active part of our lives, are completely convinced that I'm going to pass away in childbirth. They won't openly admit it, but their behavior has reached the point where it's constantly making me feel stressed and uncomfortable. My husband would say things like, "Please make sure your life insurance is up to date," and, "I'd like you to meet with a lawyer and draft a will." I didn't know what else to say besides, "That's kind of intense, but alright, if that makes you feel better." When my husband asked me to go through all of my possessions for what I wanted to be saved for the baby versus what I would want to be returned to my family in the event of my passing, I put my foot down and said absolutely not. My father-in-law got on my case about how I was making things difficult for my husband in the event that he will be a grieving widower with a newborn. I'm just gonna add here that I've had a completely complication-free pregnancy and have 100% no reason to think I will pass away screaming in the coming weeks. When I tell my husband this, he calls me paranoid, but I feel like my father-in-law just wants me to pass away. His whole life identity for the past 35 years has been amazing single dad, one that never dated or had close friends or even hobbies really, and it seems like he's looking forward to being able to guide my husband through what he went through. At this point, I'd honestly be happy to never see my father-in-law again, and I certainly don't want him in the delivery room, especially since he told me he was putting his foot down about me not being allowed to have an epidural or laughing gas. He's a commanding presence, and I know that whatever he wants in the delivery room he will get. My husband, in addition to backing his dad on everything, acts like my due date is my passing date and has completely pulled away from me. Every minute with him is morbid, stressful, and a reminder that our marriage seems to be crumbling. No matter how many times I tell him his behavior makes me stressed and upset, it's just getting worse, and I don't want it around me while I'm concentrating on giving birth. Do I owe it to my husband to let him stress and upset me during labor? Is his presence at the birth more important than a safe and healthy delivery? My therapist says no, but this whole thing has been so weird I feel like I need some outside perspective. Update. I was unfortunately right about my suspicion that my husband wasn't going to therapy. I sat down with him and very firmly put my foot down about my mother being my support person in the delivery room alongside him, and that my father-in-law was not to be anywhere near the delivery room. I also was very adamant that I was getting an epidural and that he or his father had no say about any medical procedures I may take. I also told him that I was seeking my own therapist as his and his father's actions were worrying me. My husband didn't take it well, to put it simply. I had never heard him shout at me like that, and it scared me a little. He told me I didn't need a therapist, and that he was just trying to be prepared. I admittedly lost my temper and told him that I wasn't going to pass away and that it wasn't my fault his father's trauma wormed its way into his head, and that he needed to fix it without taking it out on me. He yelled at me that he didn't need therapy. That caught me a little off guard, so I asked him why he went to his therapist, and was given advice about my potential passing if he felt he didn't need it. His expression gave it away, and he caved not long after. It turns out there was no therapist, and it was just his dad. During the times he was supposed to be at therapy, he was just with his dad. I'm still fuming, but in the end I gave him a choice. He could either go to therapy or I was leaving because I had enough of their delusions. He chose to refuse therapy, and I packed my things and stayed with my mother. At that point I still wasn't planning on divorce because I had hoped that we could possibly fix our marriage, as naive as it sounds. But my ex decided that if he couldn't convince me to go back, then he would get his father and the rest of his family to do it. I had to change my number due to the amount of harassment and insults they hurled at me. In the end it was just my mother in the delivery room with me as I gave birth. I'm thankful for the nursing staff, as they were a godsend, and I felt safe that neither my husband or his father would get even remotely close to the room without my say-so. The divorce is still ongoing, so I can't give too many details on that front, but I have hopes that we can work out a tentative co-parenting agreement. My husband isn't a bad father and he loves our baby girl, but our relationship is over. And as long as I live, my father-in-law will never be near my daughter.